Welcome, Neetika and Ipshita, to the podcast Brain and You. Um,
Hello. Thank you for having us, Vandita.
what I want to understand from you today is this new, reasonably new vertical, which is ABA, BCBA, and behavioral analyst. These three verticals, because I don't see a lot of this term that I don't get to hear a lot of this term from the parents that we work with. And whatever little I hear a lot of negative impression or confusion. I So I think the purpose of the podcast today will be to maybe break a certain amount of myths, to maybe clear a bit about this whole space of ABA. And before I start, I want to know, how did you both land up here when the whole world is running behind OT and speech therapy?
Lovely question.
You
All
want
right, let's go get into it. We both actually have a background in psychology. And for me, I discovered all the different realms of psychology. There's the developmental, the neural, the behavioral, and then the clinical. And behavioral psychology really spoke to me. I think it
Mm-hmm.
made sense to me in a world with so much happening, people having their own individual thought processes and ways of behaving, that there is a pattern and there's a method to the madness that is society, and there is a pattern to our behaviors, and that clicked. Understanding that there is a whole field dedicated to behavioral psychology which focuses on observable behaviors and really analyzes them in their unique context,
Mm-hmm.
which is applied behavior analysis, ABA. That really sparked an interest for me as a psychology background person who was muddled about where to go. Behavior analysis spoke to me and ABA spoke to me.
I think my journey started in a similar way. I also had a background in psych, and I think as I was figuring out what I wanted to do when I zeroed in on working with a neurodiverse community, I stumbled upon my first job that said they would train us on ABA. We had no idea what ABA was. We knew behaviorism, we knew behavioral psychology, but in at least in India, because I did my master's in India, ABA as a term was not something we came across in our textbooks. At most, it could have been like a tiny two-line paragraph in an illustration somewhere. So while I was curious, I was heavily skeptical about the science, but first job gave it a shot. I think within 3 weeks I was sold. It's the the systems, the it just makes sense. And I think more than anything else for me, it was learning that this ABA equips you with a toolbox that tells you how to understand and work with behavior. That I think was really, really powerful. It made sense, and I think what what kind of sealed the deal for me was when I was able to use it with the students I worked with, and I realized that, oh, this is not just a teaching methodology that is going to be used with my students. It's something I apply to myself. It's something that exists in the world. Like, it's based on principles of science that exist in the world. It's not made up. It's about how we use these principles in our teaching methods for really effective data-based teaching that has results. And it's a toolkit. So if one thing doesn't work, there will always be something that works. And that's very, very reassuring as a practitioner to know that you'll find something. You need to just figure out, once you understand the behavior, we've got the information to be able to figure out a way forward. Like, there will
Okay.
always be a way. So that's
So,
kind of, I think, how we came to ABA.
what kind of behavior can ABA solve?
Oh, all. But the solve is an interesting
Yeah.
word. I think when we talk about behavior analysis, when we talk about behavior more specifically, we are looking at everything that is observable and measurable. Anything we can see and possibly take a measurement of is behavior. You are smiling, I can observe that, and for how long, I can measure it. You are eating, I can observe that. You're walking around, you're talking to somebody. These are all observable behaviors. What maybe I can't observe is maybe your internal states, right? How happy are you feeling? How sad are you feeling? Maybe I can't get a little bit of a depth into that. So all of these behaviors externally are part of behavior analysis. Where we intervene is when behaviors are becoming either maladaptive, in that they're not serving the purpose you wish to. For instance, you had a fight with a friend, and instead of talking to them about it, you've decided that I'm just going to have radio silence for 20 days. That's not very adaptive to your friendship. Instead, if you recognize that, oh, this silence or this not talking or this me moving away from my friend is a behavior that I don't want, and I actually want to be with this friend, maybe I have to talk to intervene and get myself closer to the goal that or the values that I uphold. So ABA is a great tool to recognize behaviors that you're finding that are not leading to favorable outcomes in your life. They're making you feel uncomfortable, maybe even unsafe. And therefore, recognizing those behaviors and then figuring out, okay, what's the purpose that that behavior serves? Can we make that purpose happen in a different way? By talking, by approaching, by facing our fear, all of that. So the resolving, first you have to figure which behavior is to be resolved and why. And if it holds ground, then ABA becomes a toolkit to make that happen.
And
अच्छा मुझे एक एग्जांपल दो, मुझे एक एग्जांपल देके बताओ. फॉर ऑटिज्म, choose a behavior and tell me that ये behavior ABA के through can, for the lack of word I'm using solve, but ये behavior autism में solve हो सकता है through ABA.
So I'm just because we are in the field, I'm going to first, before we get into that, challenge a little bit कि first misconception about ABA कि हम लोग behavior solve कर रहे हैं. पहले हम लोग इस चीज में आते हैं कि ABA का नाम क्यों बदनाम हुआ है, because it comes that we come and we fix behaviors. The foundational philosophy behind ABA is that you are choosing a behavior that is, or you're choosing a goal that is socially important. And behaviors तो सबके हर चीज में है, हम क्यों किसी चीज में intervene करेंगे? If a child is speaking, why are we going to intervene to reduce that speaking? Because ABA teaches you both how to improve certain behaviors as well as decrease rates of behavior through your principles of reinforcement and punishment. So the first foundational philosophy that ABA needs to understand is the target behavior that you're picking, is it a socially valid one? So for instance, in autism, if a child is stimming, that's not something we would typically intervene on. That is a child's way of regulating themselves. That is who the child is. That is the autistic world of the child. At what point can it possibly become a goal for us if maybe the stimming is self-injurious, or if the stimming is becoming so high that it is really interfering in this child's ability to learn or interact in the world? That is when we're like, aha, you know what? This is maybe a behavior that we need to intervene on, not to reduce it, but to figure out how to teach the child, hey, इस केस में ये appropriate है, अभी ना आप थोड़ा इसको कंट्रोल कीजिए, बाद में दोबारा करते हैं, because we're trying to talk to you. That's where ABA will come in. ABA will not say कि stimming is wrong. ABA will say, बट अभी हम लोग बात कर रहे हैं, बच्चा थोड़ा आप अपने hands को नीचे रखिए, let me finish what I'm talking, and then definitely go and do your thing because you need to regulate. So that would be an example of thing that is socially valid for us to intervene on.
ठीक है. How soon, कितना जल्दी एक पेरेंट को ABA start करना चाहिए for the child once diagnosed, or maybe not diagnosed, मतलब वो क्या symptom होगा या sign होगा? How early can they actually start ABA?
The minute you start recognizing that there are delays in developmental milestones, the minute you start seeing those early screeners of, no eye contact, no babbling, the minute you start figuring out that my child is not really meeting the age appropriate goals that they should, is probably time to seek help, because there is some amount of intervention that is required. The sooner you intervene, the more chances of success in reducing that gap between a child's developmental trajectory and age appropriate or the trajectory of their typically developing peers.
तो मुझे ये बताओ, मतलब let's say when I was speaking to somebody yesterday, she mentioned that they worked on a child who was 18 months and they did ABA. How does ABA work on an 18-month-old child?
Yeah, so I think now we're getting specifically talking about our population that we work with. So for the benefit of everyone who's also watching, we are now talking about neurodiverse individuals. So kids on the autism spectrum, ADHD, etc., what we're calling invisible disabilities. The lovely thing about science is that now we are able to diagnose something like autism at a much younger age of, say, 18 months. When we were in school, it used to be 3 years old. 3 years of age is when diagnosis would happen. Now screenings are happening much earlier. Diagnosis are happening a little bit after that. So knowledge is power. Knowing earlier is better. Now coming to the ABA of it, ABA is a lovely toolkit, like Ipshita rightly mentioned. There's a lot of things in there that one can pick up and do once we recognize that there is something to work on or possibly something to intervene on. With an 18-month-old, behaviors may look a little bit more like gesture behaviors, like approaching different things, or vocal behaviors like crying or just whining or just just like little attention maintained behaviors. Which of these are making the child uncomfortable and which of these are very, very functional? Me saying, to get my mom's attention might be very, very functional. Me crying when I'm hungry is also very, very functional. But me crying after I've eaten, after I've slept, after I've pooped, I've done the whole shebang, and I'm still crying, something is not right that I'm not able to communicate. Now, here we have a gap. We're not able to possibly get into what's going on. Maybe here we can give communication. Me injuring myself or being unsafe in any way towards myself or people around me, or grabbing objects that might be unsafe, maybe there we are now reaching a safety hazard. And that may happen for a child who's not that aware of their environment or knows how to navigate it without support. So great, let me give you support. I'll tell you which are the things that you can navigate. यहाँ पे prompt कर देते हैं, थोड़ा सा environment आपका अलग से set up कर देते हैं, so you're safe. And when you're going away, I'll give you a little signal that okay, that's maybe not the safe place to go. Or if you're hitting yourself, oh, that's not great. I want you to be safe. When you're being safe, I'm going to listen to you. So creating that space of teaching through experience, because at that age, it's not like we're sitting at a tabletop and we're teaching through experience, and a lot of ABA is teaching through experience. आप वो behavior में engage करो, but उसका आपको favorable outcome मिलेगा कि नहीं, that will depend on whether or not that behavior is safe or not. If it's not safe, let's not make it a favorable outcome. Let's wait for you to be safe. You get that outcome that would make you feel more comfortable.
So do you apply reward? And what is the other word you use?
Yes. So the two primary principles we call are reinforcement and punishment. And we typically will always use reinforcement. While punishment is something that is taught to us, it is kept for extreme situations. You teach through reinforcement primarily. So again, using the example of the 18-month-old, at that age, how do we pick up goals? We look at what are, again, age-appropriate milestones. So things like joint attention. Joint attention is something that may come very naturally to a typically developing child. It's not something that comes naturally to a child who may have a developmental delay. There, we have to figure out, oh, why are you not naturally looking at something that you want and looking at your mom and looking back at it? Because there is something that that is not reinforcing enough for you. Mom's attention in that minute by itself is not reinforcing. How do we make this more reinforcing for you? So we identify what is it that is important for you. Is it a specific tone in which mama responds to you? Is it a specific rhyme? Is it a specific sound? And then we start pairing that with you looking at mama and telling her to, kind of guiding her gaze towards what you want. So what the goal is, you need to first identify what is it that motivates our children to learn. That is what we call reinforcement. What will guarantee that that behavior is going to be learned and repeated over time. We use that to then go ahead and teach new skills. So what is it that you actually care about? And then I will use that and then try and teach you all the things that you may not care about as much. But let's start pairing those and give you more favorable associations of the world so that you're motivated to learn that. That's kind of the foundational and very simplistic overview of ABA.
Okay. So how does ABA go along as per the child ages? So when a child is, let's say, 2 years old versus 10 years old versus 18, can they start at any point of time, and how does it progress?
Yeah, I think, again, going back to the toolkit, ABA is the toolkit kind of remains the same, but you're carrying it through different stages of your life, which means the behaviors you're going to identify for yourself might change over time. And like Ipshita said, we're always looking for, at this point, what is the most functional, socially valid thing for you? Like if you're a teenager, what would you be doing if you were a typical teen? You'd be maybe stepping out with your friends, going out, exploring more and more of the world, maybe starting to manage some money, maybe starting to interact more with peers. What are the things that and now come back to your child. They may not want all of that. They may have very particular motivators, but those might be around these developmental milestones. They may be seeking peer contact, but possibly in a more limited setting of, I want you to engage with me in a way that I feel comfortable and I feel like engaging. So maybe songs is my way of engagement. Maybe swings is my way of engagement. So I want movement for engagement. No, I want actually more music for engagement. So when we figure out what is their motivator and what are they seeking, then we can pick up skills to work on as kids grow older. And the lovely thing that happens as kids grow older is this amazing thing called puberty that hits. And the internal states and hormones change. So everything that you knew about the world is still the same, but somehow you don't have the capability to deal with it because there's less toleration. There is more discomfort in the body. There's less impulse control. I want to act on my impulses now. So then ABA helps you change your goals a little. Identify that agar aap pehle Whenever you are hungry, you have learned to just be able to say, if you're a non-vocal kid, maybe say it on your talker, say it through signs, say it through words that, hey, I would like to have a lunch, or I'd like to have something to eat. All of that is great. Now my toleration is much less. Maybe now a lovely emotion called hangry has come into it. Hunger and anger together. My impulses are much lesser. I want it quickly and I want people to know me very well. So then the thing becomes, then our goal expands that you already know your basic understanding of asking for basic survival things like food. But now you need to probably regulate yourself a little bit,
Yeah.
get your body to feel a little bit calmer, and then you can get back to the communication. So recognize that your body state has changed. This is more complex than what we're making it feel, but ABA's toolkit helps identify this as well. Because at the end of the day, those are also behaviors. My agitated body, my breathing heavily, my context of not having eaten for a very long time. These are things we can identify using the ABA toolkit.
So the
But
toolkit
imagine,
remains, the toolkit remains same. Goals change, motivators change. And that's when we would say that is like good approaches towards teaching. If we're working on the same goal that we worked on with a 4-year-old at age 14, we've done something wrong.
got it.
We need to be looking at a different goal. If at age 4 your goal was to just ask for food, at age 14 it should be like, dude, get up, go get it yourself.
Yeah.
You are not at an age to be asking mama for food. तुम्हें पता है खाना कहाँ है, उठो, अब तुम्हारे बोलने से नहीं मिलेगा, प्लीज उठो, तुम्हें लेकर आओ क्योंकि अब तुम बड़े हो गए हो. So but the way that we teach is still the same because it's the same tools, it's the same science, it's the same principles of behavior.
You're identifying the behaviors and fixing them.
And we change
okay.
according to age.
So imagine a parent comes to you when the child is suddenly 12 or 14, has hit puberty, has never done any ABA in the past. And suddenly now, like you said, the child is extremely aggressive, angry, not able to really express. Does it make solutions tougher?
I think it does, but in that case, because this is the population that Neetika and I primarily work at Project I, is that we do work with teenagers and adolescents. It's something we have consciously chosen, and not all the parents who come to us have a history or have any knowledge about ABA. I think the first step is to first get buy-in from the parents. So we always start with like an extensive, let's tell you what ABA is. Let's tell you what we're going to be doing. These are not magical solutions. We are understanding our child's behavior. And more importantly, we cannot do this without your support. You know your child for 12 to 14 years. You cannot come and understand all the contextual factors that have led your child to learn what they have learned today. So your input is primary for us, which means you need to be sold on our science. And you need to know that we are first going to try and understand you, your child, and the context before we are understanding what's distressing them. Once we are able to communicate that, thereafter it's a little bit easier because then once we've understood the behavior, we know what are the factors that we need to change or manipulate. And as long as we keep communicating that to the parents, we have a plan. If it doesn't work, we change it. But we have that knowledge from the parents and we've explained to them what is it that we're doing. It's not a magical solution. It is a process intervention.
What is that one common mistake that you see parents do in managing behavior of their older autistic child, I would say, and how do you think they can correct that?
I think the lovely thing is that we've learned about parents over time, especially over these 2 years of developing Project I and working very closely with parents, is there really are no mistakes. They are the source of all the knowledge of the child. The kid who's come to us at 12 years of age, we are starting at age 12. They are starting with all that 12 years of information. So the thing that parents bring to the table, for all the service providers here, what they bring to the table is a lot of information, invaluable information. So the thing that parents could do when they approach a new service provider then becomes sharing all of that information, being very, very collaborative in that sense, because we want to know about what's happening with OT, what's happening with speech, what's happening with special education. We want to know about everything that's happening outside of that 1 hour or 3 hours that the child is with us, because that's their whole life. So when parents share, they become the key. And we, while our primary clients are our bachas, we're doing ABA with everyone. When Ipshita is saying we're talking to parents and giving information, we're giving them the principles of ABA, but hum sabko uska awareness rakhna padega. We all have to be aware that each behavior has a consequence. It can be reinforcing, it can be punishing. Let's try to make more reinforcing spaces. Let's all do it together. So that's where parents' information helps us, and hopefully where our work gets easier and easier as they have more conversations, because we start getting them more aware of where ABA is applying very much in their life today, right now.
So rather than a mistake, I would say like a big barrier that we often encounter is telling parents that any and every bit of information is valuable to us. So we do have parents who often hesitate to communicate that, the extent of their child's behavior, because they're worried, and they're worried that someone will be like, oh, no, we can't work with your child if they're this aggressive. What we need to often coax out of there is that no, you need to tell us what it looks like when your child has an absolute meltdown, because that will explain to us what is the level of their distress, what do we need to do to keep them safe, what do we need to do to prevent that from happening while we work. So that is something that we all often have to remind our parents, that giving us that information right in the beginning is helpful to keep your child safe. It's not going to become a reason for us to say no to you. But information is key. The more you keep away from us, the harder it is for us to figure out what are the variables that are influencing your child's behavior. That's a barrier that we come across, is seeking adequate information from parents that tell us what's going on at home. Why is he looking so distressed today? We must stand in order to support you.
But now tell me, imagine going back, there's a new parent who's watching this. So from the very beginning, so what early intervention steps should a parent take to build strong emotional regulation skills in their child?
We love that question. Can I
go for it?
Yeah. So I think a big one that we have realized, because ER is new to ERs, and emotional regulation is now coming into the field of ABA through trauma-informed approaches. Initially, both were considered to not really go together. I think it's also a little bit of a myth that emotional regulation is relevant only for older students. So I think a big thing that we would like to convey to people is emotional regulation starts as early as 2.5 or 3 years old. When you have a toddler who's having their meltdown, ER starts from that age, being able to label your emotions, being able to identify how your child regulates themselves. That information is valuable from that age itself. We are not trying to only manage behavior. We're trying to figure out how to equip our kids with the coping skills to regulate themselves. So that's, I think, one big, a big piece of information that we like to share. The second one is also that somehow I think there is this belief that emotional regulation is language dependent, because that's also what we have realized. A lot of the SEL curriculums that exist in the world, a lot of the research that is being done is heavily language dependent. So the minute you have a non-vocal learner, or a learner with communication deficits who has autism, emotional regulation as a goal just seems to get sidetracked, because they're like, language ही बोल नहीं पा रहा तो हम ER क्या सिखाएंगे? And we are seeing the harm in that. We are seeing that, but if we had persisted and figured out ways to teach them a way to communicate their emotions early on, we should have been at a different stage right now. So that's something that we're trying to figure out. What age, what are the alternate ways to teach that vocabulary and that communication to a non-vocal child? Because communication is there. It may not just be language the way we know it.
And I think regulation is something that, as human beings, we all automatically do. We all have a way of regulating. Whether it is adaptive or maladaptive is what we have to figure. And getting a baseline of where your child is at. अगर उनको बहुत overwhelm होता है, वो रो देते हैं. अगर ये मुझे समझ आता है, I'm building like a little profile of identity for my बच्चा. As they're growing older, you can notice, अब ना वो रोता भी नहीं है. He knows that अगर मम्मा पास में है, तो we don't have to cry. Mama's probably going to help me out the minute I ask. So, that change happened. They changed their regulation strategy because they had a support system in their environment. So for parents to note that emotional regulation is happening, whether or not we are explicitly teaching it. The knowledge that we get, the power of knowledge that, this is how we can regulate by identifying particular behaviors and inko regulate karte hain. That power can really empower parents to note their child's progress as they grow older. And that's why we love that parents have started doing this at a younger age, because then kids ka jo foundation build hota hai later to be like, you're feeling distressed. You have this menu छोड़ो, तुम्हारे पास पूरा tray है of regulation strategies. You have a squeezy, you have a safe room, you have music, you have this, you have that, you're asking for help. You have all of these things that you've been practicing, and now you pick. And that empowerment from parent goes to child. Now I can be independent. If I'm feeling distressed, I know what I can do. So for parents to know that it's happening, whether or not we know it, if we start adding a little bit of support around it, we will be able to pick up how that regulation is changing with time.
Yeah. Okay, so one very interesting thing. I'm sure now, since you're working with older children, you must be getting these frantic late night calls asking for help. So tell me that one go-to strategy or one hack that consistently helps calm down an overstimulated child.
You know, the hack is usually to calm down an overstimulated parent and not the child,
Yeah,
because
lovely.
I don't think there is a hack in that minute to calm down the child. A lot of it is just telling the parents that this too shall pass. Our usual go-to advice is make sure they're safe, make sure you're safe, and make sure you're managing your emotions, because the more distressed we get, the more the child is going to feed off. If a child is in a meltdown in the middle of the night and we do not have adequate information on what has caused it, what has triggered it, are they in distress, uh, we can't just turn it off. What we can make sure is that the child knows that there is a safe space for them to have the meltdown. So safety is the first hack that we communicate to parents, that please make sure that if they are self-injurious, you have removed anything dangerous from the environment. If they're hitting their head, slip in a pillow. You guys take a step outside and breathe. You've been through them their entire life.
Yeah.
This too shall pass. Once it passes, we shall go back and figure out what caused it and try and prevent it from happening in the future. But in that minute, they need to be safe, you need to be safe, and we just need to let it, tide over. Yeah.
And teaching doesn't happen when we're escalated. Think about ourselves when we are in the peak of our that same friend wala fight at the beginning, right? If we're at the peak of that fight and the friend is like, or somebody third party comes in and be like, she's your best friend, yeah, just go and say it's all right, and you're like, get out of my way, I can't even think about words right now, I'm fuming. So when I'm at my most angry, words, rational thinking it's not the time sometimes. And then you often think, you know what, give her a minute, give her a day, kal jaake baat karenge, she'll be much more receptive to the same. So yeah, it is traumatic, and we acknowledge that, because these crisis moments make us feel like we missed a teaching opportunity. But let's know that that was not the teaching opportunity. The teaching opportunity is us learning and observing our child in that crisis, like Ipshita said, keeping them safe, and then coming back tomorrow and being like, today is the teaching opportunity.
Yeah. But tell me one thing, a lot of parents who come to me, and this is a very common question they ask, that when they take the child for therapy, any kind of therapy, firstly, it's such an expensive session. So when they take the child for a therapy, they travel so many hours and they finally reach, they notice that in the therapy session, most of the time, the child is crying or is having a meltdown, is not adjusting to a new thing. So tell me, what should a parent do when the parent is taking the child to the therapy session and the child is absolutely out of control? Because they have already reached the place, they've invested that time and so much of money. Now, what do you think? Is there a hack? Is there a way to manage it?
With the child, before, I think you can always prepare a child. Preparation, knowing where you're going, it's always knowledge is power. So preparing them either through a visual schedule or talking to them about it on the way, if you think they can understand and grasp that concept. But before engaging any services, like taking it a step back almost, the parent and service provider should be on the same page. So because the parent is engaging in these services, like you said, the time and money and effort is between the parent and the service provider. So are you all about on the same page? Has the service provider communicated to you that, because usually typically it takes us 2 to 3 sessions to do that initial pairing rapport building. So are you guys on the same page about information sharing? Ki usko ye sab pasand hai, to keep that in the session, keep that ready. So that's a favorable environment to come to. Is the service provider in turn at the beginning? Because assessment phase is very important. That's the time when we are spending, even in our group program, we spend one-on-one time with the child because we want to get to know them in a little bit more depth. We want to spend a little bit time every day after session to talk to the parents. ये हुआ, इसके बारे में कुछ information दे सकते हो? They may say, हाँ, उसको वो textures ना थोड़ा problem है. Okay, we'll put it aside. This is all about learning, and then to report back to parents. And that's something for parents to look out for as a hack with service providers, because service providers are all too happy to talk about what they're doing. But if parents come in and say, we'd love to learn, they'll let you know on a daily basis kind of what's going on, what they tried, what worked, what didn't, so that you can then give them information about something that may help in the next session. Or if something really worked very well, you may get to try it as well at home. Because फिर सारे environments में ना same चीजें होने लग जाती हैं. Child feels like, okay, my parents are also on board with what's happening. If you are on board, so conversation between the parents and service provider, we'd say, is more key. And then you'll see that affect change in your child, and use them as a benchmark. Please use them as a benchmark. If it's been like 4 weeks, 20 sessions, and they're still unhappy, everybody should be talking about it.
And I think my takeaway from what you just said would be that every single therapist then should know how to understand behavior.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Regardless of
We
whether
love
you're,
that.
it is what it is, because it's like whether you're a special educator, PT, or a teacher, or any individual, the minute you're working with a child, whether or not they're a child with, different needs. I mean, ABA is used, it's used in regular teaching as well as what we use in organization. But if you do not, if you and I don't know how to talk to each other and form a rapport, we are not going to go ahead. So any service provider, the first thing they need to know is how to understand and pair with the child, how to build a relationship. And then, as Neetika said, if you're having difficulty with that, talk to the parents. There has to be transparency in communication. So the service provider needs to know that the child has probably traveled for 45 minutes, is probably sleepy or tired, and hence they are going to walk in distress. So please do not start off work the minute the child has entered the session. Maybe you need to give the child 5 minutes to chill down, sit down, play some music, and then present instruction. If that communication is not happening, you're just making therapy more aversive for the child. The child is not going to learn. It's just counterintuitive. It's counterproductive. It's a waste of time, resources, and money for everyone. So service providers and parents need to talk. And honestly, sometimes parents are the best people to tell us that, कि करना क्या, मेरा बच्चा गुस्से में आया है, उसको ना ये दिखा दो, वो शांत हो जाएगा. Great, आपने बता दिया है, 10 मिनट ना हम उसके साथ ये वाली वीडियो देखेंगे, अब वो खुश हो गया है. Now he's ready to learn.
So tell me, this is my last question now, which is something every parent asks. What should be the first therapy I should go for as soon as I see autistic features or my child has been diagnosed?
I mean, we are biased.
That was going to say we're very biased for this question.
We'll say ABA, obviously.
But maybe also child dependent. And let's take a step back. Even before you went to ABA, OT, speech are your, regular trifecta. Your pediatrician will probably be the first one to recommend. Ki agar there might be more sensory profile and needs, they will probably recommend OT first. If it's more of a speech delay, what is the need of the hour? Maybe speech, oromotor training, etc. If it's more of challenging behaviors, currently that's the first go-to with ABA, even though we know that that's not the be-all end-all of ABA, ki challenging behaviors they work hota hai. There's a lot of skill acquisition, but that may, for the first therapy, that may be the need of the hour. But eventually, I think Ipshita and I will both endorse this, is it's like it takes a village to raise the child. You need a web of community services around the child, with the parent being the key to communication between. So eventually you want them all. But for the first one, probably rely on the medical expert, because they would have done a profiling from a medical point of view, and they can probably guide you
because we never say that it will only be ABA. The only reason why we would say start with ABA is because it at least gets a little bit of information about what is the child's preferred of learning. But of course, if we have a child who's come with very severe sensory needs, we would probably refer them out and be like, please first go and get an OT consult. Let the OT person tell us, what is this child sensory seeking? Is he sensory aversive? What do we need to do to regulate this child to then teach? And that's what we do as well. We always make sure we're talking to our clients, occupational therapists, to understand what do we need to do to physically regulate our kids, because once our kids are regulated, then we're going to start teaching. So I think it would totally depend on that, but it has to be a village. We'll never say ABA over OT, ABA over speech. It will be all three. Dosage of each will depend on the child's needs.
Got it. Okay, wonderful. Anything that I left out on that you think parents will find useful?
Older students also require services. Please don't give up on your kids. And when we mean give up, it's not that you've given up, but please know that learning is lifelong. So
don't stop interventions.
Don't stop interventions, because our students have now entered their teenagers, and we feel like there is no space for them to be. In India, it's a sad truth that there might not be enough places for them, but it doesn't mean that we can't want to, continue to work on independence, on life skills, on finding spaces where they could thrive.
Very true. Yeah. I mean, this has been my observation as well, that as soon as the child is 10 or 12, the child is literally nowhere, just at home. And in a way, give up, but yeah, in a way, so everybody has kind of given up that, okay, now the speech won't work, the OT won't work, he won't get to do much, the schools are not taking him, so he's, yeah,
Yeah.
you were saying
And
something.
maybe we look a little differently at independence as well, because independence does not have to mean that you're doing everything on your own all the time. Nobody does that. Independence means that you've identified things that are preferred to you and motivating to do on your own. And you feel supported enough that when there's something that's a little difficult, requires flexible thinking, or requires problem solving, you have that team around you that you feel empowered to ask for help. As adults, we also don't feel empowered to always ask for help. We're like, oh no, uska apna chal raha hai, usko nahi puchte. But if our students feel empowered to ask their parents, ask their teachers for help, we know that now they can at least navigate the world on their own. So yes, there are not enough services for older teens, residential spaces or vocational spaces, etc. But let's think of independence differently so that the child can thrive at home in the meanwhile. Spaces will get created. You are their parents, you are the biggest advocates. We have seen it time and again that parents have come up with the best of programs. But till you're waiting, don't be just waiting. Make sure you're getting your child more and more independent. Get to know them a little bit. Identity build karte hain. Preferences kya hai? Let's make you more independent and interested in that. Aversive kya hai? Let's make you say no to that. Let's just get you talking and advocating for yourself more in the interim, because that's a very valuable skill for life.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank
It's going to be
you.
very, very
Thank you for
useful.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.